Good morning, everybody. Let's see.
Good morning.
Good morning. Everyone else is muted. Are you guys able? Okay, there we go. So
I can unmute myself, but I am going to have 3 or 4 kids off on PD day here once everybody rolls out of bed. So I'm probably going to keep myself muted unless we need to do some interaction.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. I have to tell you, I still am trying to get used to the whole that you're there, but you're not there. But we do have Taylor in the room, so thank you, Taylor, for being in the room as we get started. And I'm not sure. Okay, there you're muting again. Good morning, Shelley. Good morning, Henry. Okay, good. That's where I forget and go, I'll just have a one-on-one and then she's saying something. Feel free to unmute, Shelley, because I hear that with a small group that it's actually working really well. So feel free to do that and join in. Or not. So how's everybody? What's that?
Wendy.
Shelley.
I will unmute, but I'm in the middle of an SOBP that has to be removed.
How appropriate. We're in that whole thing. You can fill us in of what you can. That is the reality of our business of trying to put aside time to be in programs and learning, and also at the same time be carrying on business and doing all the other things we have to do. Oh, she's off. Good morning, Henry. Hello back. And you can also feel free to unmute and join in if at any point. There you go. I think you have.
Actually, we'll see. How well can you hear my voice? I'm using the Mac.
Very well.
Okay, good.
Good. So if you're using the Mac, you'll go right along and forgiving me on times that I screw up on this machine, because I am such a Mac girl and I'm on this laptop in here going, yikes. As that is that once you go Mac, you'll never go back unless you're forced to for a few minutes in here. So just wanting to, first of all, say good morning and thank you for taking your time this morning and all the way through this program we call Ignite. I am in today to do the session that is about offers and what we really need to know about offers, preparing offers, presenting offers, whether we're presenting offers from our buyer to a seller's agent or presenting offers to our sellers, all of the details around that and how we can be our best and most efficient and effective at that. So in terms of starting off and kind of checking in with the homework from the last program, how is everybody feeling so far in terms of Ignite and what you've gotten from it? And I am, because we're a small group, going to go from one to the next, if you guys are okay with that. I'd like to hear from you how the program has been for you and what your biggest aha, most important information would be to this point. So who would like to start? Okay, Taylor? Taylor's going to start, guys. Okay, perfect. Forget about this too.
For myself, being in commercial, I just find the kind of the marketing aspect of this, like the drip campaigns and just making sure you keep in touch with everyone. Obviously, building the database is big, but I think keeping in touch and making sure you don't lose clients. Like if you do a deal with them, you make sure you keep them. After that, you're touching them. You're sending them drip marketing campaigns. Or else they'll go to someone else, or they'll forget about you if you forget about them. That's
a great way to put it. I love that. They'll forget about you if you forget about them. I love that. Thank you. Anything else?
Otherwise, I'm learning a lot about residential, which I think can't hurt.
Yeah, perfect.
Definitely.
Well, I have to say that I always count on somebody for commercial when it comes up and take it to somebody who specializes, because they certainly have aspects that are very different.
Yes, it is very. It's similar, but a lot different too.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. And as we look at kind of where you've been so far, Henry, do you want to go next? What you feel is the most important thing you've gotten so far out of Ignite?
Well, sort of like some of us here, we've come here with lots of experience, and also with our age, you also sometimes get stuck in doing habits, and not habits are all good. So it's always good to go to these sessions just to rejig the mind and rethink and re-look at how you look at the box, not thinking outside of the box, but turning it around and looking at it from new angles.
Oh.
And that's what these sessions generally do.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I have to say I truly relate to that as I prepped for this last night and went, oh my gosh, there is something that if you really want to learn, to me, one of the best ways to learn is to teach. And whether that means in a setting like this to teach, whether that means one-on-one with your clients and being able to take them through the process, that it really is about teaching and sharing information, helping people to understand the process better, the information better, and we do get stale. We do get to be somewhat mechanical, I think, would be my own personal experience with that. And honestly, I have to say there was a point that I actually felt myself being a little bit bored, which is one of the things that I think is probably one of the most dangerous things you could ever be as a realtor, whether it's commercial or whether it's residential, is feeling like you're not growing. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's really great input. Janice, anything for you?
I think for me, Wendy, one of the biggest things has been learning to or hearing different ways that people engage in conversations and how to have a flow of the conversation where it doesn't feel like you're trying to do a sales job on somebody, where it's a natural fit into a conversation about, yes, I'm a realtor, if you ever have anyone, and if you're interested, hey, I've got this great app, and it just naturally flows when you have something positive to say about it. And I think it struck me that when I was a nurse, I had no problem saying, oh, I'm a nurse and this is where I work and this is what I do, and people would ask all kinds of questions and there would be all kinds of back and forth with it. But I think sometimes when people feel like you're trying to sell them something, all of a sudden the walls go up and they have, and the guard is there. But this takes a very different approach to it, which I think is a great thing, and it just flows.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Can I ask you a question about that for a minute, Janice?
Sure.
When you're saying that it helps you to have a natural flow of conversation so that they're not feeling like you're going into a sales pitch, is there a part of that that is for you in the comfort level as well as for a potential client or whoever you happen to be talking to? Not feeling like you're having to sell?
Right. Yeah. I don't like feeling like I do not like pressure sales. I just, wall goes up and you just kind of stand back, please.
Okay.
And I think it's been because of experiences that I have had. So I'm very sensitive to that.
Okay.
That's what this course has helped me do is, okay, well, it doesn't have to be like that.
Okay.
Right? You can share information, you can tell people what you do, you can encourage them to check out your app, you can promote yourself without feeling like without making somebody feel like it's a pressure sales.
Yeah.
And they have to commit to you and they have to do something.
Okay.
Right? That it's very easy just then to follow up. For example, when I was out looking at cars the other night and they asked for my email address, and I said, oh, well, you know what, I have all my information here on my card. And, you know, if you would like to just take this and then you have it, and if you need to contact me. So it was just a very natural flow into the conversation. But before, I probably would have felt like, oh, then they're going to feel like I'm trying to sell them something.
Ah, that's huge. Absolutely
Right.
huge. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, it just, I thought, oh, okay, this is really easy to do it that way, and to come from the point of view that it's all about your heart and that you want to help people.
Yeah.
It's not about trying to make money, right? It's not about trying to, you know, get more cash. And yes, ultimately, that's why we're in it. We want to make a living. But I think where the heart is probably the bigger thing.
Okay, cool. So would it be fair to say, Janice, that you now feel like you own what you do and who you are a little more?
Oh, absolutely, for sure. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. That's such a huge step. And particularly as you come into something new. But you know what? As a 15-year veteran, I can tell you there's lots of days that I need that more so than what I actually put out there. So thank you for sharing that. That's a big one for me as a wow, yes, that is an everyday part of what we have to do and have to be on our absolute best at every single moment because people see you whether you're at the grocery store or whether you're in a social situation or you're with a client, that people have to see you as that professional, but you have to see yourself there first. Thanks. That's awesome. Shelley, are you back there that you want to be able to share with us? We were talking about, I know you had to go for a second, but we were talking about the most important thing that you've gotten from Ignite so far in the process, in the program. Are you there, Shelley? She's taking care of a deal, so she may not be back even though it says she's there.
I have a question to ask you with your,
Thanks, Shelley.
with your wealth of knowledge.
Uh-huh. Go ahead, Henry.
Would you think it's better sometimes to not think of yourself so much as a salesperson, but more of a knowledge broker? It's the knowledge that you're giving to the quality of the conversation.
Oh, I love that term, knowledge broker. I love that, Henry. I think that's an absolutely incredible term. I've never heard it before, but it really resonates with me because I always feel like that is my job. I always explain to people, my job is information. I'm the information highway to make sure that you have everything you need when you make your decision. Because I don't know if anybody else gets this, and I don't know if it's relative in commercial business, but I find a lot of people try to make me make their decisions, and it's always something I come back to go, your decision, my job is information, to make sure you have every bit of information that you make the best, most informed decision based on good quality information. But information broker, I love that term. I think that's a fabulous term. Can we share that? Are we okay to put that out there?
Feel free.
Awesome.
Feel free.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I think I love that. Yeah, anything else anybody wants to add of where you've been so far? Okay, so I'm going to throw out the question to go according to our plans. For the day, we have the completing your 10-4s daily and getting calls in. How has everybody been doing with that? And are you ready to go with that for the next few minutes?
Sure.
All right. All right. So I know Shelley's kind of in the midst of something, so I'm not sure she can join into that. How about you, Janice? Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that will be fine. I'm good to go.
Okay, excellent. I'm just going to thank you for sharing that about Wendy. I'm going to get, while you guys start making those calls, I'm going to go and let Aaron know that Wendy's having a hard time to plug in. So let's take the next 15 minutes to do your calls, to get everything organized and in front of you for that, and then we will come back and check in 15 minutes. Okay, let's go.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
going to give you guys all a 2-minute warning that you can just sort of wind down if you're on the phone, that we're going to start again in about 2 minutes. Thanks. So can everybody just let me know if you're back and ready to move forward? Thanks, Shelley. Everybody else back and ready to move forward, or just winding down your calls?
We're back.
Thank you. Awesome. So does everybody have your workbook on your computers in front of you? Are you able to follow along in the workbook? I have just the agreements that we were going to work with and work from up on the board, but as long as everybody is able to see their workbooks and kind of follow along. Thanks, Henry. Everybody else, do you have the workbooks in front of you? Well, you've got a paper copy there too. Do you? Okay, awesome. So anybody have anything to report from your few minutes of making some calls there, from your homework from the last program? We got general ahas as to what you feel that you have really learned and taking to business and it's important for you so far on the overall program. How about from the last session? Anything specific to that anybody wants to share? How is everybody doing on making their calls? Is it usually the same? You get to be here and kind of watch some of that, or get somebody to intermix and intermingle with here? Is it? Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at all the time that we have allotted to do, role playing with it, and I'm going, how do we role play when people are on the phone? How have they done that in the other programs? Was there any amount of role playing for it?
No, obviously the same.
Yeah.
Tell you.
Just easier said than done. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Which I do think helps because it really helps to anchor the learning. So I think we'll take a little different approach on some of that part. So do we have everybody back now? Can you guys let me know, Janice, Shelley, Wendy? I know Henry's back and ready to, raring to go. The rest of you? Shelley, you told me you were. Thanks, Wendy. Janice? Okay, she's still on the phone. Perfect. We don't want to impede that progress because that's important. So we're going to continue to kind of move along a little bit. I'm really curious in terms of getting into properties as part of the weekly part of your program. How many people have hit their 10 properties, getting in, seeing things, booking to see some things you may not have seen otherwise? How's everybody doing with that piece? Anyone? Have you found that that's something that you can relate to in commercial? I know you said you're sort of, yeah. Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, but you make a point to do it more so than you would have before? To get in to see some of the properties? Okay.
I mean, like the other day I was in
Okay.
that's considered.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good. So anything, Henry, anything for you? Are you finding that you're able to do that? Is it helpful? Is it something that you know lots of the inventory in your area already?
Are you talking about actual client prospect site viewings, or are you talking about current product in market?
Current product in market.
Okay, I think it's in the case where I am out in the Aspetuck Chester area.
Yeah.
And I actually live in this area as well.
Yeah.
Just because of previous experiences and all of that, I've practically been in everything that's for sale around here.
Perfect.
It's all open houses, agent tours, things like that.
Okay, good. And what kind of value do you feel that that brings you, seeing and knowing the product?
Well, out here, everything is such a mishmash of everything.
Uh-huh.
It's like anything, no two things are alike.
Okay.
So, and also with out here in this area, it's also with some of the things, it's relation to highway, proximity to services, but also it's the fact of road conditions, because I go down to some of these places, even during the winter, I will go down some private roads just to see what condition they're in, because when looking at a place during the summer, it's not the same in January at 8 p.m. in the evening.
Okay. So you're still gathering product information, product knowledge. Okay.
Correct.
Excellent. Thank you. And for some people who are newer to the business, it is a piece that there's nothing like being there live, nothing like walking in the door and having looked at it online, having seen it in the listing cut, but what does 800 square feet in this house look like? What does it provide? All of the pieces that are really difficult to get until you get there. You know, as realtors, we're all paid to put our clients' best foot forward, best pictures on the net, all of those things. Anybody else want to chime in on that? I have to say that when we do agent tours as an office, generally when I look at that part of the program and kind of go, wow, there's not a whole lot of people getting out to the agent tours, and I think it's such a great way to get to know parts of the market that you may not always be in, but certainly it's product knowledge and product info everywhere you're going, which really it goes back to what Henry, you said at the beginning, which I still just love this term of being an information broker. So when I saw that part in Ignite, I just kind of went, wow, I think that's such a great piece and something that no matter how long we've been in the business, the more you see, the more you know. is really kind of what it comes down to, of making sure that it's something that, you know, you put on your schedule and try to keep on your schedule. And Shelley, I couldn't agree more. Agent tours are extremely important and easy to participate in. You know, we all know that we get busy and there are times when things come up, but if you have to take it off the tour, off your schedule, what are you putting back into your schedule to get out and see properties? And I think it's really important on both the buyer and seller part of it. And as we talk about contracts and we talk about offers on both sides, nobody would have any offers if people didn't get in to see the houses. So it's a part that really does bring value. So just wanted to check in on how people were doing with that. All right, so as we move forward and kind of move to our topics today, oh, thanks, Shelley. Buddy system works well for committing to travel and doing these. I agree. It's something that if you have somebody you've made a commitment to go on the tours, to be part of it, and to be able to have discussion when you're there too, I think it's fabulous. It really does. It makes it more fun as well. And I think it does increase the learning. So thanks for that, Shelley. Matthew, yay, welcome. I think you're there. Coming in anyway. All right. So in terms of moving into presenting and receiving offers. Hi, Matthew. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you. Sorry I'm late.
No problem. We've just been reviewing to this point and doing calls, and we're now heading into our topic for the day, which is about getting your head in the game, number one. And what does that mean, getting your head in the game? As we talk about making and receiving offers, how do you get your head in the game? Anybody have anything to bring into that? I can tell you do. I'll give you the mic. No, not to put you on the spot, Taylor.
Getting my head in the game.
Anything that brings to mind for you?
In terms of,
An offer.
I haven't really dealt with offers yet.
Okay. So what would your expectation of that, getting your head in the game for offers, what would your expectation of that bring in? And I'm putting Taylor on the spot because he does commercial, and sorry about that, but he's here with me.
Oh, I'm cheating a little bit off the page here, but yeah, kind of showing up. It says it's calling it the offer stage. I'm showing up with their client, kind of being excited and feeling rewarded, I guess. And I'm cheating off the page here, but you have an enthusiasm and kind of it's an exciting time. There's an offer on the table, right? You're halfway there, I guess, or you're getting there anyways.
All right, great.
It's a good step.
Good. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. So yeah, it's what we work for. We do all of the prep. We make sure we have our product knowledge. We go out there, we sign up buyers, we sign up sellers, we present their properties, we present properties to our buyers, and what is that next step that we all kind of do yes, they made a decision, yes, we're going to write an offer. It becomes that excitement, and how do we process that? How do we prepare for that? And how do we make sure that our head is fully in the game for that? So that's what we're really talking about over the next little while. And the process of moving people from working with them to present the information to now putting it in a structured format as to what they're prepared to go forward with, in the case of our buyers, on a purchase and sale agreement to offer. Henry, count to 15 and see what their face looks like. I love that. So when we're looking at offers and the things that we need to get our head in the game for, how much of that is prepared ahead of time? What are the types of things that we're doing as we get to that point for offers? Anybody?
Good morning, Wendy. This is
Hi,
Wendy
Wendy.
speaking.
Hi, Wendy. Chime in for us.
Hi, everyone. I like Taylor's response, enthusiasm.
Yes.
I think I just turn that off. Sorry. I like that response because it's so easy to think about that, oh my gosh, it's such a low ball offer, this isn't going anywhere, you know, those kind of attitudes. So nothing ventured, nothing gained, and writing an offer is a great starting place to make things happen. And yes, there's a lot of homework prior to printing off an offer or preparing an offer. I think one of the big things is having your comparables in front of you. So reminding your buyer of what is on the market, what they've seen, and also the price ranges of comparabilities to establish a good price and starting point for them, showing what homes have sold for in the area, listing prices and sold prices as well.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you. So making sure you know the competition, you know what's gone on in the area, you know how this house might measure up against that. All great things, and enthusiasm, I think, is a very important thing. One of the things, we've got sort of a charting format on page 11 that just really talks about, so here we go. We're going to write an offer or we're going to present an offer, depending if we're representing buyer or seller. So buyer writing an offer, we're going to go through the details of that shortly, but then we have seller responding to an offer, and we get to experience both sides of that at different times with different people and different personalities. The one thing that I have found to be consistent with buyers and sellers over lots of years of dealing with lots of different ones is we have enthusiasm. Do you find that sometimes they have emotion attached at the beginning of the writing an offer or reviewing an offer process? How many of you have ever experienced emotion bubbling up for people at that moment in time? Anybody? Yes. No? Definitely. Thank you, Shelley. One of the things that has served me really, really super well is understanding that emotional tie. And I've also experienced it myself as an agent on behalf of my client. And I've also watched other agents experience it when you're in that moment and they go those magic words. If you're representing the seller, you get that call and they go, I have an offer for you. And you think, oh my gosh, thank you. You may not say it to them, but you think, I thought I was never getting an offer on this house. I'm so happy, I'm so excited, and all of the things. And then you get it in front of you and you look at it and you feel the emotion just kind of drains, your stomach drops, and you go, oh no, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to present this? My clients are going to flip at me because they're going to be in an emotional state. I think one of the things to know and understand is human nature, and presenting this to people to understand it in the sense of human nature. This isn't you, Mr. Seller. This isn't you, Mrs. Buyer. This is human nature. When emotions are high, intelligence is low. And that's what happens to all of us at some moment when the emotions take over and you feel yourself just go, bah! And you know you can't say it, but how do you help ground yourself, and how do you help ground your buyers or sellers in those moments when emotions are high and intelligence is low? That's one of the big pieces that we all come across at some point. Sometimes we might be dealing with a business person who it is a business transaction and there might be a lot less emotion. But I've seen emotion creep in there as well. And it's something that when you know it and recognize it and can help to really, really settle it, it can make your negotiations become a whole different process. So how would you settle emotions for people? And this might vary because you have so many different personalities, so many different levels of emotion. And sometimes you may have been dealing with a seller for 4 months on the market and never seen this reaction from them before, and never seen the emotion just bubble up. It may not be because the offer is good or bad or indifferent. It may be that reality of, uh-oh, this is actually happening now. What's next for me? And all of those things that drive the emotions to move up. So settling emotions, and it's different with different people, but settling emotions and recognizing when people are in a highly emotional state, helping them to calm that emotion is the way that you can really get into a good conversation about the task at hand. Whether it's writing an offer with a buyer or presenting an offer with a seller, that until you get the emotion out of the way, it's really difficult to talk about the terms in front of you. Does that make sense? Yep. Thank you. Okay. Keep calm. Reminder that buyer wants the lowest price, seller wants the highest price. It's a business. Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else? I think that keep calm yourself on that one is probably one of the pieces that helps us to know. I've had the conversation with clients so many times exactly in that way. Before we talk about details that we're going to put on an offer as a buyer or details that I'm about to present to the seller, and what does the seller usually want to know? The one thing they want to know. Price. What did they write down? What is the offer? Like, that's it. That's the only important thing. Our job is to make sure they know and understand there's a whole lot of other things here we need to talk about as well. And I have found that the minute I actually joke with them a little bit about, so here's what happens to human nature people, that in times of high emotions, it's hard to think clearly. And you know, we all do it. We've all done that. Feel the emotions go up and go, oh, I don't make my best decisions when I'm highly emotional. I find a lot of times as soon as I have that conversation with people, sometimes they look at me and think, what the heck are you talking about? And other times they look at me and go, oh my God, that's exactly where I am right now. And have some conversation about some of the other pieces involved in the offer. Some of the things that are going to be standard to all offers that we need to discuss, and then let's get to the pieces that you're really kind of focused on. So if we've got that to be able to deal with them, help them understand. I've had clients joke back to me to go, oh, here I go again, I'm getting emotional. I know I need to let that go in order to talk sensibly to you about this. And I think, wow, okay, that's moving forward. I have to keep myself in check on it lots of times. And I have to say some of the most challenging negotiations I've had with people have involved somewhere along the line somebody who's just totally gone off in that emotional state. And you don't have the ability to always calm them, but speaking in a calming manner, bringing it back to some facts, and being able to be non-confrontational at those moments. Because what happens when you're highly emotional and somebody starts to come at you in a confrontational manner? Anybody? Anybody ever have that happen? Anybody have a spouse that I probably jump on that the most to my spouse, who after 30 odd years still doesn't get it that when I'm emotional, don't do that to me, because I won't go to a good place, absolutely, and then I will recognize it, but I'll still go to that spot every single time. And clients are no different. Every one of us that's human, we have that ability to jump all over the place when our emotions are running away. So from a perspective of how you're heading into it, we're going to talk about all of the factors of it, but just keep that one in mind. I think it may actually really work for you. So making the offer happen, the process, we're sitting down, we're going to have a look at the actual purchase and sale agreements and go through those a little bit. But let's talk about the preparation. So representing the buyer first. So let's talk about from a buyer perspective. We're going to prepare to write the offer. Janice, we talked about, or Wendy, you brought in, doing a good CMA, making sure they know and understand how the comparables are the same and how they're different, and looking at some of the averages that are coming into it. How many times have you had a client be stuck on one property that went for a low price that happened 3 months ago, and they're looking at a property and that number is in their mind in the property they're looking at right now? How do you help them to see that one property is a piece of the puzzle as to price, but it's not everything? And it doesn't mean that the seller is going to look at this in the exact same way, because what if those people had to go? They had relocation covering them. I know none of us have seen that in the market right now, where relocation's covering somebody and they drop, and somebody gets a great deal, and then you go, yeah, but that wasn't you. You weren't ready to make a decision then. Now, here's what we have in front of us, and that may or may not have relevance to the sellers of this property. Let's look at it on case by case. So in preparing to write the offer, let's look at on page 13, obtaining the buyer's pre-approval letter from the lender. So I'm not sure how many people in the room or on your computers actually take that letter and put it with an offer that you're preparing for representing a buyer. I honestly looked at this and went, wow, send or not send? To me, that's a big question. I honestly have never done it. And from a privacy perspective, I'm not sure that I would do it. Anybody have any opinions on that piece? I understand how it could be relevant to a seller to know and understand that the buyer that's bringing forth an offer actually can make this happen and does have their finance in place. Something I've always discussed with the agent for the buyer. I've always wanted to know that, and I'm sure that we've all had, I know I've had lots of them happen in the last year and a half where they look like they're golden till you get a purchase and sale agreement in front of the mortgage broker and gone to underwriting and you find out they're not golden. But can anybody weigh in on that? Are you allowed to do that, Janice is asking. And I'm putting forward to it to go, remember that this is a US-based Ignite that we're going from. I can't say, and I think that is an and question, but there is a privacy piece there that you would have to have the client's permission to ever do that. And I just wanted to bring it up in having conversation about the pros and cons of actually doing that. So what happens if that ends up not being the lender that they use at the end of the day? Has anybody ever had that happen where you're going in one direction? Once the purchase and sale agreement gets in, the mortgage broker who works for several companies says, you know what, now that I see this, I'm actually going to go in a different route and we're going to go to this lender. So I think there are lots of pros and cons to that. It's something that you would have to have written permission to share something like that in terms of from the buyer's perspective. Having it in our file and knowing that they're truly pre-approved to me is absolutely positively essential, which you went through in terms of signing buyer's agreements and getting through to that. I know you guys already went through that, am I correct? Of getting that piece? Yeah. So now it's about, do you actually produce it for them? Personally, I would tell the listing agent that I have it. They are fully pre-approved in the proper pre-approval process. And that would be basically how I normally would. Shelley, anything you can say on that? I know you're working with lots of buyers. Nope. Okay. Producing a comparative market analysis, we touched on that a little bit to go, how are they the same and how are they different? And how many properties are you able to bring into that comparable to be able to have averages? And then what does your house have that's above or below average that brings it into that or brings it out of that? I think one of the key things that buyers need to understand when we're writing an offer for them is that's a guideline. Absolutely, from the day real estate first started to ever be traded, it's always about what a buyer's willing to pay and a seller's willing to accept. And that really is what creates the rules of real estate and the market conditions. Is that doesn't mean because we see a comparable that that's what the sellers are willing to accept. And we know that from working with both. They have a reviewing the tax records for information about pricing history. Does everybody know that you actually can go on to the HRM system? Excuse me. You can go on to the assessment accounts, and back to 2010, even if a property wasn't listed under MLS and it's sold, it will show you the sale price under the assessment program. So if you're not doing that right now, it also can be helpful for you. If you look at it and something has expired but you know it's actually changed hands, you can go into the assessment program and put that property address in, and you can find out what it actually sold for. So that's a good piece to have, and not exactly what they're referring to in our notes, but that is what we have to work with here. I'm sure that would be something from a commercial standpoint that's got to be helpful where you don't have quite the same system. Ensuring the property is still available. I don't know, I think I've never seen a time in my history of doing this, this business where things change so quickly that a property can be on the system for a year and all of a sudden you circle back to it with your buyers and there's 2 offers come in and you go, wow, how come this always keeps happening? I have been in more multiple offers in the last year than I had in the previous 5. And it's just the way the process has been happening. So is the property still available? Because we all know that buyers have been probably looking in a lot of cases at a few more properties than they might when we don't have as much inventory. So that's something that you definitely need to check in with, know where it stands. When speaking with the listing agent, building rapport and gathering information. So building rapport, what do we do to build rapport with a listing agent? You kind of are on that fine line between, yes, I think we're going to write an offer for you, and I don't want you to think that yours is the only property out there. To keep your actual negotiating edge for your client on behalf of your buyer of going, okay, so yes, we have good interest, but I don't want you to think that this is the only property, and I don't want you to present it to your seller that this is the only property out there that's a potential for them. So building rapport, getting to know how they're working. I think one of the pieces that also is important there is understanding kind of some of their hot buttons, because the emotions are high, intelligence is low thing. It affects all human beings and certainly affects us as realtors on both sides of that. Asking questions to discover what's important to the seller. I will never forget, in my 2nd year in this business, I listed a great property that was going to need renovations, but it was a hot spot in downtown. And my client had owned this property. It had been in her family for over 60 years. And she had been renting 2 units in it. The agent that came with the offer came, another agent came at the same time, and another agent came at the same time. I had 3 offers on this property. One of the agents did not ask me a thing about the property. Both of these units were vacant in this property. And the agent whose offer got accepted asked me a lot of great questions about the property, its history. He knew that he'd done his homework. He knew that my clients had owned this property for a long period of time. And my client, who was elderly and still quite emotionally attached to this property because it had been in her family for a long time, really valued a letter that one agent sent about the property, about his clients, and about their intention for the property. The agent who never asked me a question put a 2-week closing time frame on his offer without asking me anything. The agent who asked me a lot of questions put a 2-month closing. And my client chose that offer. Afterwards, the agent who asked me nothing called me and raked me over the coals. I'm talking swore at me, told me I had no idea what I was doing. There was no way that there was a better offer on the table than what he wrote. I was closing it in 2 weeks. What more could your client want? And I waited until he went through he really was ranting at me. And I just said to him, so my client has a lot of old things stored in the basement. And he said, yeah, we saw all that junk. And I said, well, it's not junk to her. And she has family members who are going to be coming from out of town to go through it. And she would never have agreed to close in 2 weeks. And he just flew at me and said, well, that's just ridiculous. And I went, no, it's my client's decision. And it was a real learning experience for me on my second year in the business to go, do not assume, do not assume, do not assume. A vacant property does not automatically tell you they want to close in 2 weeks. A property where there are things in the basement and everything else is vacant does not tell you it's all junk. Sure, if somebody came or went or, oh, okay. Okay. So the lesson on that for me was find out everything you can find out about the sellers, about their reason for selling, about what's important to them in order to bring an offer forward, even if you're not getting to a price they might like. What are the other conditions you're putting in, and how are they going to affect the seller's emotions? How are they going to affect what the seller sees as being important to them? How many times as a seller's agent have you had an offer come in where nobody asked you about closing? Nobody asked you what's important to your sellers. A key piece that really doesn't take that long to do, but can really set your buyers up to win. And that was definitely one of those experiences I'll never forget. I'll never forget the agent that cursed at me for so long. I'll never forget the learning in it to go, wow, know your buyers, know your sellers, know their wants, know their needs as much as you possibly can. Does that make sense? Anybody have anything to add to that? I know people have had lots of experiences with different things within that, and I would think that would be very much the same in commercial as well, Taylor. I would expect of understanding what people are trying to get out of the deal. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
oh, go ahead. Yes.
the fact there was a situation one time where multiple offers, there were 3 offers that were being presented. One was actually at a higher price, but actually had more restrictions on it.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it was offering a shorter closing, it was the fact was they wanted the home inspection. The other client was waiving all of this. And the other client the other person couldn't understand why you wouldn't go for the bigger price. Well, the other one's actually just more easier to live with. It's not always about the price.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that, Henry. It is not always just about price. know the situations as much as you can. Go ahead.
No, that's it. That's
I thought somebody else was, Wendy?
Wendy?
Yes. Go ahead, Wendy.
I'm fine. Can you hear me okay? I was getting an echo.
I'm not sure if we're having technical difficulties. I can't quite hear you, Wendy.
I'm finding that sellers are often very emotionally attached to their home, and with comments from the buyer of what they like about the home and how they can see themselves in it,
Yeah.
and what they appreciate about the home, can really have an impact, an emotional impact on the positive side for sellers, as opposed to a buyer claiming that, oh, we're going to tear down this wall, we want to do this, we want to do that, that's why we're submitting this low offer, those sort of things.
Yes.
Generally, sellers don't want to hear about their precious home being demolished.
Oh, great point. Excellent point. Thank you, Wendy. So basically, they are, if they've lived there for a long time and there's emotions attached to it, same as we talked about earlier, emotions are high, intelligence goes low. But when they know, for example, somebody who's been in a house for many, many years and they know there's a family coming in to make it their family home for many years, that would be a very important, relevant point to those sellers, to feel connected to the buyers, that the buyers are going to take care of it, that the buyers are going to have a family there, that they're going to have something in common with what they've put into the home. Because most sellers will have pride in their home in some way, shape, or form. So great one. Thank you, Wendy. Anything else before we sort of move on from that point? No? Okay. So inquiring about activity on the property. So on the activity on the property, I have to be honest, I still miss the FinTrack one where you could go in and see every agent that's opened it and if they've sent it and all of that great information that I still cry about that we don't have on Paragon. We can see general activity levels, but that doesn't always tell us much of anything. And it's something that in telling people, if you're flipping over and you're on the seller side, telling people how much activity, it's your interpretation of the activity. It's not something that we always really know for sure what that activity actually means. In saying to a seller, I always say to them, activity is activity, offers are offers. And there's a big difference between the two. How many times have we had sellers that they're like, I know, but we had 6 showings this week. Are you sure we should look at this offer right now? Yep, showings are showings, offers are offers. Very different going in there. But from a buyer perspective, if we're looking at it for the buyers, activity can represent 2 different ways, because if there's lots of activity and no other offers, anybody ever had a buyer that then goes, well, what are they seeing that I'm not, that they're not coming forward with an offer? Because it can work for you or work against you in terms of activity versus offers. So it's something the more information you can present, we are the information highway, information brokers, and all of that information is great, but we also have to help the buyers sort through it and understand what's the most important thing as they're putting together their offer, as we prep them with it. Obtain the seller's disclosure statement. I think different people work on this in different times through the process. Personally, if I'm going back to a property for the second showing, I'm always going to be asking for all of the documentation, because it really does indicate to me that my buyers have a potential to put an offer together on it, and I want to be able to make sure they have every bit of information. There are times when that disclosure statement I just actually had it happen this week, that my buyers felt like this was going to be their house, and we looked at the disclosure statement and they went, no, it's not going to be our house. the things that I see there scare me. We went through them again. We went through them. We had other people chime in on what some of the things are. And at the end of the day, they went, no, I don't want to waste anybody's time. I'm never going to get comfortable, in this case, with a wood foundation. So lots of different things that can come in there, but knowing that up front can save everybody time, money, and aggravation of being able to go through that on the front end for people. How's everybody doing with the new disclosure statements? Anything anybody wants to chime in on those? Positive, negative, anything? How different they are? Nothing? Okay. Finding out if there's been other offers. So what does it tell you to find out that there's been other offers? Henry? Okay. You like the new disclosure, Henry?
I found no problems with it at all when I had them fill it out.
Great. Excellent. I actually find that it's easier to read and it's a little more informative in some ways than the previous one we had. And I have to say, I love that you have one now for bare land. That's been very helpful. I've got a couple of deals going on where we're going to be building, and that's been a really helpful piece to have the bare land one. It's brought up some questions for clients that they didn't even think of, that when we had talked about, and then they saw it on the disclosure, it gave them a whole different set of questions for it. Yeah, how long they've owned the property, any kind of environmental issues. There's a number of different things depending on whether it's rural or it's urban. Yeah, so it's been a nice piece. I know that, yeah, the environmental for commercial is an automatic pretty much, but this does list the history right on it if you've done its studies. Okay. Somebody else chiming in? Nope. Just want to bring up for a second because I wonder how everybody does this with disclosure statements. I have had disclosure statements come in signed with offers, and my own personal on it has always been to put the disclosure statement to be signed off at the same time with all the conditions that are attached to it, particularly with the inspection condition, because I have had times where things come up on inspection. They weren't, the sellers knew but didn't disclose on the disclosure, and I required them to make the changes on that before we signed it. Does anybody else have anything they want to bring into that? Is there any things that you work with that you've found to be helpful with that? That's just been my personal one, because I've had times where inspections brought up issues and they weren't mentioned at all, and the disclosure statement as part of your purchase and sale agreement actually does play a very important role in the after effects of closing that property. Anybody else have anything there?
I thought you were supposed to do the disclosure before the inspection.
It depends on how you write it in, because you have a date or a number of hours. I always write mine with the date that our inspection clause is due to fulfill and tie the two things together.
Yeah, I just find I find on a personal side, I like doing the disclosure statement before the home inspection, just for them to use that as a blueprint to ask questions during the home inspection.
Right, yeah, which I use it for that as well. I just don't get them to sign it then.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Shelley, Janice, Wendy, any terms on that?
I'm sorry, Wendy, I'm in and out because of this, what I'm dealing with, but are you suggesting that if you're representing a buyer, the buyer not sign off on the property disclosure statement until after they have been through the inspection?
Yeah, that's just my process, that I always wait until then in case there's questions and things that I may ask them to change that they haven't acknowledged in it.
Okay, yeah, no, I see that.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear.
Does that make sense to you? I mean, that's just my own personal one, and it came from, you know how you'll have a deal that'll stand out and you'll go, okay, note to self, from now on, I'm not getting people to sign that till after inspection. That's where those things I find usually come from. One that you go, learning. There was a learning one.
The other thing that I have had occur, and it's never a comfortable situation, but if a sale has fallen due to an inspection and there's something come to light that the seller didn't know previously, then I make them redo a new property disclosure statement.
Absolutely. Great point. Really great point. Because once it's been brought up in an inspection, and there's always a bit of room for controversy on this one, once it's been brought up in an inspection, they have to disclose it. Now, where I say there can be controversy on that is it doesn't mean that the inspector's findings are firm and final. It means that if they go in and do more investigation into it, that they have to be able to say what it was and what their investigation was, and here's what we actually have. Does that make sense? And chime in on that one with me, Shelley.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I go so far as to tell my sellers a building inspector does not specialize in certain areas. So if they brought something to light, then you need to get the expert in, like a roofer, for example, that is better qualified to make a judgment, and then you can go from there. But building inspectors are not be all to the end all.
Right. They're generalists. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well said. Thank you, Shelley. I actually just had a deal last week where they came back from inspection and said that there were cracks in the chimney in the attic space. Seller knew the house really well, and his first question to me was a really relevant question. He said, from the picture you sent me, Wendy, did the inspector stay at the hatch and use a zoom? And I said, that's a great question. I will ask that question. Agent didn't know. And I said, so did the inspector actually go into the attic or stay at the hatch through the whole thing? Agent didn't know. And I asked to get confirmation. My seller went into the attic, went up close, and took several pictures. And it was the effervescence, because there had long ago, before they had chimney and roof work done, there had been a bit of a leak. And it was long done, long dry. It was like 5 years ago. And the pictures that he took showed it totally differently. Agent came back to me and said, wow, great seller to know their property and provide us that. My buyers are fine. So it was really an interesting case of going, yeah, that is generally what an inspector will do. So just all of the different situations that can come up with that. Okay, so any questions on this part of it so far? So we've just gone down the checklist, and thank you everybody for chiming in on that. So we're going to move over to page 14, which is writing the offer. The piece we're all waiting for, that we want to be able to write the offer, put it in terms and conditions that protects the buyer, makes sense for the buyer, helps the buyer to get where they want to go, fulfills their dreams of owning this house. So when we look at that part, keeping the guidelines in mind that they have as a checklist here, ensuring your buyer knows that all checks, they talk about earnest money, that is a U.S. term in here. We're talking about a deposit check. And in some cases, it might be a direct deposit that we're dealing with a lot now as well. So talking about that, and they say to check in with the team leader on that. When it comes to the direct deposit and the new system of it, check with Linda on it, because it does come in usually fairly quickly. My big question on it has been, when you get notified, does that mean you actually have the deposit in, or you've just been notified it's coming? So those are things to know for technicalities of time frames on deposits. And technically, if it's not sitting in the account, if the money isn't there, do you actually have a deposit in yet? That is a clause that people use to get out of a deal on both sides. So just be aware of that in the timing for that, because it is an important piece. Does that make sense to you guys? If you have a deposit check that has to be dropped off by a certain time frame, make sure you get a copy of it that is signed or initialed by the person you're dropping it to, whether it be the other agent, whether it be their office, wherever it happens to be. Make sure you have something that states that you dropped it off there and here's the time frame and here's who took it from you. That's a really important piece in your file, always, on deposits. At some point in this paperwork, they talk about deposits being average 2 to 3%. I find it very interesting in our marketplace. Rarely do I see 2 or 3%. I've had clients come from other countries where they're like, so do I have to put 15% down? I kind of go, wow, really? No, you don't have to. So there is some guideline around that, but it is something that you need to know and understand what the buyer understands in terms of risk. So it's about deposit being a gesture of good faith, that they're going to complete the deal as per the agreement. We know that that deposit is protected in many of the clauses in the purchase and sale agreement. However, it's something that there is always still some risk. I have gotten into the habit, particularly because of a lot of out-of-town buyers, of putting that deposit due on the last day of the conditions. Anybody else doing that in their business now? Are you doing any of that, Shelley? I don't know if you're, I know she's in and out. Henry?
No, that makes sense that it would be done after the conditions. My question is, dealing with other provinces and that,
Yeah.
what is the Nova Scotia norm, or what tends to be more the precedent here for a deposit?
So part of that, it will depend on how long that property is going to be off the market before it closes. The longer you're going to be off the market before closing, the longer time frame between firm up and closing, the stronger the deposit needs to be, because that is the piece that has to cover the seller if the property's been off the market and for some reason it doesn't get to close. So that's a piece that always explaining to clients that the longer the closing, the bigger the deposit, so that it would basically cover your time frame of being off the market, because now you have to start at point zero again. I know that's not something that happens all the time. I've certainly had it happen, unfortunately. I had one about 2 years ago that person had come in as soon as I put this condo on the market, wrote a great offer, not bad deposit. It wasn't a high-priced condo. It was pretty reasonable. And the 3 days before closing, the agent for the buyer called me and said, you know you're in trouble when you get the first thing they say is, you're not going to believe this. And he said, you're not going to believe this, Wendy, but my client just got offered an incredible job in Florida and she's gone. I'm like, so if she's gone, why are you calling me 3 days before closing? Because obviously you knew this already. And secondly, you do know that the deposit is going to go to the seller now. And he's like, she knows that, we know that, we'll sign off on that, it's not a problem. Just wanted you to know that that's why this is happening. In that case, my seller actually did great because he got that deposit. There was no adversity to them for releasing it to the seller. And we put it right back to market and we sold it again for the same price. So he actually ended up ahead. I didn't, because I did my job twice, but that's the way it goes for us. But the seller was fine because we had enough of a deposit, because it was a bit of a long close. We had enough of a deposit to be able to comfort him that if he had to have it sitting an extra couple of months, he would have something to help him do that because they were long gone before close. So in terms of that, I think it's important that we understand and help the buyer to understand the purpose of the deposit and that it is a gesture of good faith. And if something happens that they don't close after all the conditions are met, then they do forgo that deposit. I've once had it happen and it was a job loss and my seller graciously said, I can't do that to them. I know this property is going to sell right away again, Wendy. I want them to have their deposit back. And I went, oh, wow, okay. So that is something that they had the option to be able to do. Does that chime in there or answer the question at all, Henry?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So when it comes to getting into the actual doing the offer, so is everybody comfortable with agreement of purchase and sale part 1 common clauses in terms of all of the pieces that are on here? I want to get a feel from you guys as to how much time you want to spend in that piece of it and how much time we want to spend in pieces that are about all of those conditions. Anybody, is there anything specific that you want to make sure that we cover? No? We're good? Okay, I'm going to keep going down the list here then. So it talks about doing all of this online. And how many of people present here are doing everything on dotloop? Is there anybody who's not using dotloop who's online? Janice does most things on it. Anybody else? Henry, are you using dotloop?
I did try to use dotloop, and
Yeah.
I was dealing with people of a certain age where they just couldn't wrap their head around it.
Okay. Yeah.
So I ended up, because I have the full Adobe suite on my computer,
Yeah.
I can do the PDF documents and was able to do it that way with them, and they were perfectly fine. But I have full Adobe Reader on my computer, so it makes it easy.
Okay. Okay. So do you have a signing part on Adobe that you do, or is that you're doing? How are you doing the signing with that?
Well, I was able to make the changes, send it back to them, so they could do a scan, sign and scan.
Okay. Okay. So they're physically still getting a paper copy at some point that they're signing on for that.
dotloop was just, we were just having too many problems with it with dotloop.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Shelley, a lot of the time, yes, is using it. Janice, are you using dotloop? Yes. Okay. Matthew, are you using dotloop? Not sure. It's there. So this will be probably not super relevant to you. I don't know if your document. Do you? Yeah. Okay.
Same thing as Henry.
Sorry, yes, I am here, and yes, I am using dotloop
Oh,
all the
thank
time.
you. Thank you. Okay. Yeah.
Similar to Henry, some love it. And some
Uh-huh.
Henry just dry.
Okay. So Taylor's
Everyone that
Taylor's saying the same thing as you, Henry, that, you know, some people just don't want to do that. I bring this up because I've had both experiences too, and I never prejudge people because I have a 72-year-old seller who thinks that I am the coolest person ever because she's signing on dotloop. And she truly does. She's actually sent me 2 friends. And she's like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever, ever. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know you were that into technology. And she's like, I wasn't, Wendy, but this is so easy. I love this. I love it. I'm like, okay, this is good. So sometimes you really can't tell. It's not necessarily an age thing as an exposure thing as to how much technology they're exposed to. I've had some other people that I thought, there's no way they're going to want to sign this electronically. And once you introduce it to them, I've actually had 2 people who were business owners who have then researched it and brought it in to use it in different ways in their business. So it's something that the one piece I find with it though, no matter what their age and generation, is remember, if you are taking people through dotloop, you are deciding where they're signing when you fill it out to send it to them. I just had this experience on a deal with my buyers where the listing agent sent me back a counter and didn't send with it the original offer with it signed in the appropriate places. He just sent me the counter. We dealt with the terms of the counter with him saying, I'll get the rest back to you tonight. And my lesson on this was he did get the rest back to me tonight, and his seller had signed on that they accepted the offer. Now, we had already signed the counter offer. Think about this one for a minute. So when I got that back and I looked at it and went, ooh, wow. That can happen so quick, so easy to any of us. And the reality is the agent determined where the signature went. No matter what the conversation was, no matter what the rest of it was, the agent determined where that signature went. In this case, my buyers laughed and said, oh, it's no big deal, Wendy. We're fine with what we signed on the counter. But I had to take it to them and say, this is what came back, and ask for their direction and explain it to them. So it could have potentially blown up the deal, honestly. So my point of asking everybody if they're on, yeah, ouch, Shelley was right. There was a lesson in it, and the lesson in it is, for me, I never read documents on my phone, ever, because I have old eyes. I don't know why. I was born with old eyes. And on my phone, I cannot look at a legal document and feel comfortable enough with it to fill it out for people to sign. For me, I always have my iPad with me to be able to do that. But it really brought up a point of when we send that document for signatures, has everybody gone through it with clients that you know that it just takes you from point to point to point and you just click and sign? So the reality is a lot of times they may not be reading it fully as they're signing it. I have since then gotten into the habit of sending them a PDF copy of it and having them acknowledge receiving that in an email before I send it for them to sign. So that was just one of those pieces. Those are the ones you remember most, right? When you go, holy, you know what? And go, now what? This is a new one. Now what do I do with this? So I personally love, 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 love dotloop. I look at it and say, every mile I put on my car is a mile on me, and dotloop has taken so many miles off me in the last 2 years that I just am so grateful for it. But like everything, it does have its pieces that you have to just, be aware of at all times. So providing a PDF copy first, or providing a PDF copy that, whether they're techie or they're not techie, there's always that piece where they can say, but it just told me where to sign. I didn't know what I was signing. So I would just say a CYA thing on that one. Going back to the presenting an offer or getting your offer ready for your buyers, sending a cover letter is something that they suggest in here, which I have to say I've done many, many times, and it has worked for me many, many times. In the case of multiple offers, sending a letter that I've requested it to be initialed by the sellers, so I knew that it went to the sellers, has actually gotten my clients the deal. And in 2 cases that happened in the last year, it turned out we didn't have the highest offer, but the letter meant we had the strongest offer. And I think that's been talked about already, that you guys kind of brought some of those things in, that, it is about what's important to the seller. Both of those cases, they were long-time ownership. One of those cases, my clients were going to gut the house and totally redo it. However, that was not the way I presented it in the offer. I didn't lie about it. I just didn't talk about that piece. I talked about that they were going to make it their home for many years to come. And that's really what got it. And, that the agent told me that afterwards and said, your letter really did make the difference in what they chose. Henry, did you have something you were going to bring into that?
No, I agree with you. It's because actually I know of another buying situation,
Mm-hmm.
and they literally, it was the fact they had mentioned their children in it, and it was an older couple, and they just loved the thought. That was the reason why they built the house, was to raise their children in,
Mm-hmm.
that another family was going to come in and raise their children, and that's why they bought. Because they got another offer and it was higher, they
Yeah.
wanted to go to a family that reflected them.
Yeah, and sometimes that's something where, you know, another agent may have a hard time with that, or us as agents, it may happen to us and we don't get the offer accepted, and then you realize afterwards, wow, you know, I need to think about all the different elements that go into this offer and know as much about these sellers as I possibly can, what's going to work for them. So the cover letter summarizes the offer, but it really humanizes it, and it goes back to emotions because it's emotional for a lot of people. So then it just talks about going through the loop and checklist for writing an offer. Price and terms, we talked about doing a CMA, the pricing and the statistics that help you with that. How many people have in the last year thought they knew their buyer until they put a price on an offer? Anybody have that happen? I know I have, that you've presented the CMA, we've talked about this property being priced properly, and here's, you know, that's why it's getting so much activity, and then we sit down to write the offer and they go, yeah, but it's a buyer's market. And you kind of go, not relative. This house here, let's go back through the CMA, let's talk about what sold, how it was the same, how it was different, how that brings the pricing to where it should be, which is why all the activity on this property, and they go, nope, it's a buyer's market. I want a low ball. And you kind of go, oh, okay, how do I make this attractive in other ways if I'm not going to be able to get their price up into the place that it's going to work for them? So talking about price and terms, and sometimes buyers have to lose something they really want before they're ready to truly listen to expertise and your opinion and why and where it came from and all of that. And I think that that's something we all need to know and understand, that making sure you prepare them for that is key to keeping them as buyers. I picked up a set of buyers not long ago that the agent they had been working with, a house that they loved, the agent told them, no, that's a low ball, we're not going to write that, and didn't write the offer. And the house got an offer 2 days later, and it turned out the offer the people accepted was $25,000 less than what these clients wanted to write in an offer that the agent told them was low ball. So no question, he was no longer their agent, and that was something that was a learning experience for them. So learning for all of us, though, to know and understand that you have to get as much information as possible. So we have seller's disclosure. Is there any concerns with that? Conveyances, always an interesting one. What's included? What are they leaving? Anybody ever have the fact that buyers look at 5-year-old appliances as halfway through their life, and sellers look at 5-year-old appliances as brand new? Kind of a little different viewpoint on them, and that's something that is natural. That's where the emotions come back in. Buyers go, yeah, well, they'll last me a couple of years and I won't have to put out the money right now to buy them again. And sellers go, those are my brand new appliances. I never had brand new appliances in my life until those, and still see them as that. So, you know, kind of softening that to people to understand, is it super important to you, and are you willing to pay more money to get those? Conveyances of things like, I had an offer not long ago that asked for approximately $150,000 worth of antiques and was not price appropriate even without those in it. And my sellers, no question, I thought they were going to like explode in front of me. And I explained to the buyer's agent, do you know that you're asking for antiques that are worth approximately $150,000? Buyer had no idea, seller or the buyer's agent had no idea. they were just nice furniture to them. That was it. So sometimes it's making sure we know what those conveyances really have the potential to be worth. Does that make sense?
Can I bring up something?
Yeah, absolutely, Henry.
Because there's something that's happened out here before, and I've seen it, and if you hadn't seen it, you would never believe it.
Okay.
People taking out part of their garden, shrubbery and that, before the closing of the house, thinking they could take it with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And showing up on the day of closing and find out the peony bush is gone.
And we go back to the emotions, right? On both sides of that. Because that is one of those things that even though you've said to sellers, anything you want to take with you, we got to identify it on here right now when you list, and then you do it again when you're presenting an offer to them and go, okay, let's be sure we haven't missed anything that you are going to at the last minute go, oh, but I really want to take that with me because it's part of the property we're selling. So what's happened for you when you've shown up and they've taken shrubbery and landscape, basically?
There was another thing that was involved too, a wall-mounted TV that was removed that wasn't supposed to be.
Yep.
And the situation was we almost didn't, at 4 in the afternoon, we didn't know if we were going to close.
Yeah. That's when emotions are high, intelligence is low.
They were ready to walk out. They were that annoyed. They're like, we don't need this.
Yeah. And then it really truly is about emotions, isn't it? If people are reacting because anger is an emotion and people feel like they're being ripped off at that point. So what did you do to calm the emotion and settle the issue?
Looked them straight in the eye and said in a clear voice, either we move into this house today or we don't, and we move on, but we'll have to make a decision, and that has to be yours. Where are we going to go? And they decided to move into the house. And because the fact was they both realized what was going on and just realized it is about the TV we can get back, the plants, we can always get other plants. But it was a fact, I understood where they were coming from, but moving trucks were coming in the next day from out of province. There was all this other stuff that was going to be involved. And it's that whole thing of someone has to be with a clear head and bring it back to reality.
Yeah.
And it's not being rude, but the fact is you see where they are going with this, and the train has to stop right now. Do we keep going or do we get off?
Oh,
does that make sense?
Beautifully said. Thank you for sharing that. That is one of the best examples of when their emotions are high, you make sure your emotions don't go high. You allow your intelligence to go high and just bring them back down to earth. Beautifully said. Thank you for that, Henry. That was great. I love that.
It wasn't like
Well, it's hard to stay above it when their emotions are that high, and you understand why, because they feel wronged, and they then start going, what else did they take? What else is going to, it says to them that it's not good faith anymore, right? People start to think other things, and you just don't know what experiences they've had to make their emotions go that high over something like that. Usually it's some experience we've had that causes that. So beautifully said to be calm and look them in the eye and say, here are your choices, and here's where we need to make a decision. It's your decision. I love that. I think that's so beautifully said. And how many times when it comes down to the close, does it end up in the lawyer's office to try to get those things worked out? And at those times, sometimes our clients' emotions are going higher and higher and higher. So I think that was such a great example of that. Thank you for sharing that, Henry. Well done. If I'm in one of those, I'm going to call you, okay? Okay, cool. So what about, go ahead. Oh yeah, absolutely. And sorry, we probably should have Probably should have taken a break. Does anybody need to take a break for a couple of minutes before we go wind down in our last hour? I know you guys can kind of do that. Let's not know. Okay, let's, Taylor's just taking a break for the washroom for a sec. Time for acceptance or dealing with the offer. So what are people's standards in terms of when you're writing an offer? What kind of time frames are you guys finding acceptable to go out there to the seller's agent to leave an offer open from till? How many hours, how many days, what kinds of timings are you guys using currently in leaving your offers open? And I would love everybody to chime in on this. Go ahead.
Okay. It depends on the popularity of the property. If I'm working with a buyer that's purchasing something that I expect is going to be very popular, then I will have a much shorter window for the seller to respond.
Like what kind of short? What's short to you, Shelley?
Within 6 to 8 hours.
Okay. Okay.
And sometimes even shorter.
Okay.
You know, it just depends. If I know that something has just come on the market and I'm able to get in there at noontime, write an offer, I'm going to ask for it to be dealt with by 5.
Okay. Beautiful. Okay.
If I'm going in to view something that has been on the market for a long while, people are away or out of town, then naturally I would leave it open a lot longer, usually 24 or even longer.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So has that ever come back to create a problem, even though it's property that's been around longer?
Not really. I find that you know, the big thing is respect for one another in this industry. So I'm not going to hold a gun to an agent's head that has already told me that their clients are going to be hard to reach. And I just ask them that if there is another offer come in, to please be as kind as I have been in getting my offer to you in a timely manner. You have to, you know, kind of respect that and let us know if we're going to be in competition or how you're going to handle it.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Any sort of comments while you're chatting, Shelley, of leaving offers open overnight? Anybody else want to chime in on how long you're leaving offers open and why?
Well, I will say if you're dealing with someone from out of province and you're dealing with time zones, I'm curious to hear Matthew's view on that one too, especially being in South Shore.
Yeah,
that sometimes just
go to a
logistics and time differences.
Okay. And Matthew had to leave for a meeting, so he just had to chime out a couple minutes ago. So he won't answer you that. Okay. So what are you generally doing, Henry?
Well, I was dealing right now with BC, and I just have to, and also I know what their schedule is. I just have to leave things for the next day, but I have to think 12 noon our time, for the fact is we're dealing with the time difference, and I don't know if that's too much of a lead time or not.
Okay. And do you identify, when you know you're dealing with BC, do you identify that we're on Eastern Standard Time or Atlantic Standard Time, depending which part of the year?
Oh yeah, and we're always, I'm used to dealing with time differences, so that's the standard.
Okay. Okay. So time frame, again, is very individual based on what you're dealing with. Basically the same
I'm
thing Kelly said.
Curious to hear I'm just more curious to hear from, because I'm new to the Nova Scotia game, what is the norm for Nova Scotia, what is considered acceptable.
Okay. Anybody else? Wendy, Janice, do you have anything to add as to what's acceptable when you're doing offers? Anything that sort of works for you? Wendy?
Hi, Wendy. It really depends on the situation. Of course, as was already mentioned by Shelley, if a property is in high demand, you want to have a quick closing. Also, the most important thing is respect for the other agent. No, I shouldn't say the most important. That's not quite true. We do need to have respect for the other agent, but most important, it is about the buyer. And it truly depends on each situation. I like to discuss it with the other agent and say, oh, can we deal with this, within a few hours at such and such a time? And if they agree, then great. If not, then sometimes we can't do exactly what the other agent wants, but it is all about the buyer. So it does tend.
Good. Excellent. So yeah, it is up to the buyer ultimately at the end of the day for them to decide how long or how short. I often will tell them what I generally try to do because, and again, sort of certain situations you get into over time, you kind of go, okay, note to self, not doing that one again. I'm with Shelley on the short time frames on anything that looks popular. However, I've also been burnt on some things that didn't look popular because all it takes is one person who's been circling and they hear that there's an offer, which is the listing agent's job to make sure that they do hear that they got an offer, and all of a sudden there's something else coming in. So personally, I try my best to not leave them open overnight. My experience with sellers is the longer they have to think about it, the less likely they are to sign it. That's just been my own personal experience with it. Always want to try to be practical for the other agent and for the sellers. One of my first questions for the other agent is often, are you working with dotloop? Because if they are, their ability to deal with it is usually much quicker than otherwise. So I think that there's guidelines in terms of that, and what everybody has indicated is respectful guidelines to make sure that we're trying to do what works for everybody, but ultimately at the end of the day we represent our buyer, so they have to, if they say, oh yeah, no, only leave it open until 5 o'clock, then as long as they have all the information around that, then we only leave it open until 5 o'clock. So any questions around that? Thank you for everybody chiming in on that one, because I think there are lots of specific incidents that come in and times when we're trying to work in our best way to represent the buyer and get the seller to accept the offer. That's ultimately at the end of the day. And if we make them super uncomfortable with the time frame, they may not be as happy with it as if we gave them a little bit of time. Loan approval, time for financing, all of that piece in there. I don't know what you guys are finding. I'm finding that finance times are much longer. I've had 2 properties that took 4 offers accepted before we got finance, and it wasn't that high a property, 2 of them. And they were both in the 400 range. And that's just something that, depending on where we are and where the people are, as much as the agents in every one of those cases told me they're fully pre-approved, there's no problems, we still had problems. And they happen, they come up. I've been asking for more time in representing buyers. If the mortgage broker tells me 7 business days, I've been writing 10 business days. In some cases, that's exactly what I'm seeing coming in from other buyers and other buyers agents. So it is something that we have to be realistic with and understand where they're going. I will say that one of the questions I've been asking buyers agents now, every instance where we had finance not come through, every single instance, people were pre-approved with somebody in a bricks and mortar building for a bank that were not mortgage brokers. I actually have gotten really challenged on that one, that I now ask that question up front to an agent and say, is your person pre-approved with somebody who is actually a mortgage broker or with somebody who's in the bricks and mortar because they will take longer, and my experience has been every time they didn't get financing, that's where they were. Just my experience right now with it. I don't know if anybody else is having any of those things happen. Dates for conditions. So when we go through purchase and sale agreement and we look at, I know Anne's done lots of programs on the actual purchase and sale agreements and going through all of those details. That wasn't really what the plan and the focus of this, even though we're talking about representing buyers, representing sellers, it was more about how to help them through the process than the actual agreement of purchase and sale. Is everybody okay with that? Or are there things you want to go through as a group in the agreement of purchase and sale, part 1 common clauses? Do you want to go through it piece by piece? Just chime in if you can for a second to just write a note for it or come in and say. Are you, Taylor?
I'm actually okay with it.
Okay.
I will say I recently had where I had to use the broker hotline, which was fantastic.
Yes.
Just to get that.
A clause that was beyond the regular. Yeah. Yeah, we are very.
Or just,
in my
just for the fact if you need to include or not.
Yeah. In my opinion, we're very fortunate to have that and to have phenomenal brokers. I certainly have done that many times. Even if I find myself questioning something I'm writing as a clause, I always say, what would Anne write? And then if I can't quite put it into terminology of what would Anne write, I will either text her it or I will email it to her or I will call her and say, I just want an Annism on this clause, please. And I just am very grateful that we have that. I think it's phenomenal. We have great service with that. And if you guys haven't experienced that yet, do it because it is phenomenal. It's just one of those pieces that details in clauses are everything. And the more complicated or just out of the ordinary we're dealing with, the more important the details of those clauses are. And the more you do them, the better you get with them and the easier they get to put together. And since NSAR or CREA took off common clauses out of web forms, I know I had already had copies of them all, but I don't know if everybody does, but I've seen emails go through and Facebook posts go through saying, yikes, they're gone. And obviously they had a reason for taking them off, but I'd say go to Anne if you have a question on that. Certainly worthwhile. Dates for firming up. That's going to depend on what you're asking for. It's going to depend on who's doing your inspections and how many inspections you have to do and do you have other specific things. Personally, I like to write all of my offers with one date that follows everything. And that is personally because I find it easier for the buyers, I find it easier for the sellers, and I find it easier for us, for me, following through to get all of that done. Would you mind sharing what you have, Wendy? Janice, can you tell me, I'm sorry, I did just notice that. Can you tell me what part? For the clauses, I do have a copy of the clauses that used to be as the clauses on web forms, so I can certainly send you those if they're of any value. I find sometimes in the moment of writing an offer, my brain is going, okay, have I covered everything? What have I missed? And just referring to that will take me back to go, okay, yes, I think I've got it all. And if I'm not sure, then I will make sure I get Anne's version of it or Anne's 2 cents on it. So yeah, I will send that to you guys because I've got them. Okay. Anything else in terms of specific clauses that anybody has any questions on? Anything you want to bring up? Anything that we can be doing to provide something better for you to work with? No? Right. Home warranty, they're talking about in here. Home warranty is something that on a newer house you might have an Atlantic or a Lux home warranty. They're all very different. Be careful in how you talk about a home warranty and asking for the home warranty information, remember that an Atlantic new home warranty or a Lux new home warranty, if it's condo, if it's a detached, whatever it happens to be, is a limited warranty. When it comes to things like warranties that would be on, for example, a foundation that's had a crack fixed, most of the companies have now gone to fine print that says that they're not able to move them over to a new owner. Some of them have a fine print clause that says new owner has 30 days to pay $100 to transfer the warranty. Be careful with some of those and how you talk about those. Know what they actually are. They can become such a stick point on closing, and if it had been set up differently in the front end talking about it, there probably wouldn't be an issue. So be careful with new home warranties, both from a seller perspective and a buyer perspective. That goes for warranties on roof shingles. You read the fine print, they're usually prorated over time that they're there, and a separate warranty when a seller says, oh yeah, there's a 50-year warranty on this new roof, doesn't mean it's on the labor. It's usually something that's prorated on the product itself. So know and understand those, as the perception that the buyer has and the perception that the seller has, there's room for major misunderstanding with warranties, so be a bit careful with that. Repair limits is kind of interesting when I'm reading this from a US perspective, going, not something I've ever written into an offer to say, we have repair limits that are going to be this, and usually it's because lenders will automatically dock off if the seller is giving back money for repairs. So be careful of that as well, because it can easily be viewed as mortgage fraud. So be very careful with that piece and how it gets presented and how it gets talked about. Special clauses or contingency is what we talked about, that I'll send you what they had as common clauses, and deal with Anne on anything that would be something other than that. Then we go into, we're not doing any of the role playing obviously because we're all online except Taylor and I, but going into buyer objections. So things that buyers might look at and say, oh, okay, so what about, I really, really want all those appliances. They're going to be super important to me. Is that something when you send the offer to the other agent, you say, we've asked for all the appliances, and just so you know, those are really, really important to the buyer. Does that affect how the seller feels if they haven't included them in the listing? It may or it may not. When it comes to the details of what's important to the seller and what's important to the buyer, as agents, we can really help that process along rather than just sending it and saying, that's a good offer. That's an opinion. We always want the seller to look at our buyer's offer as, oh, it's a good offer. It's not always a good offer. It's subjective, and it's something that the terminology that you send with it in letting them know closing date is key for my buyers, and so we've put in a closing of 6 weeks. You don't have to say why it's important to them, but letting them know with the buyer's permission, it is important. It's a very important aspect of this. And as a seller's agent, we always want to know what's the most important things to the buyers. We tend to lots of times assume it's price, but it's not always price. I think we've kind of covered that previously quite a bit for that one. We're going to move on by the buyers and objectives or objections and move on to representing the seller. Anything on buyers before we move on to representing the sellers? Lots of this we've related to from the buyer's side as well. But representing the sellers, acknowledge receiving the offer. It's how many times have you sent an offer and you're going, okay, I asked in it to please acknowledge that you received it. You're going, well, I wonder if they got it. It's one of the things I love about dotloop. Yes, they got it. I've had them where I'm looking at it in the morning and going, yes, the agent opened it at 3 a.m. Yeah, another non-sleeper like me going, oh, what's in this? Just giving the feedback to the agent to say, thank you so much for your offer. I have received it. Trying to get a hold of the seller. Hopefully we'll be presenting it this afternoon or whatever your time frame is going to be. It just is a goodwill gesture to make sure that they know that you're dealing with it, that you're on it. Gathering information about their buyer at that point. Again, it's the same thing we talked about when we're representing buyers, that the more we know about what's important to them, the better we can help get the offer together and bring it together. Presenting the offer to your client. So everybody has and develops their own way of getting that information to them. And in today's world with dotloop, if you've had them sign all of their listing paperwork on dotloop and you've received an offer, I find now a lot of the sellers say to me, well, just put it in dotloop and send it to me. We can talk about it after. And I kind of go, ugh, I really think I need to be able to help them through it because I know their emotions are going to go high. How do you deal with that with your sellers? Any thoughts, ideas, anything that people are working with that they find really helpful in that piece? Because usually what the sellers will say is, how much is it for? That's what they're looking at in terms of the offer piece at that point. Anybody finding any ways that they are finding really helpful to soften the blow on some offers with their sellers? No? Nobody's going to chime in on that? Okay. So do you feel that having some information about the buyers would be helpful on that part of it with them? If the buyer's agent hasn't written a cover letter, but you have done a bit of discovery with them and you now have some information about the buyers, do you think it would be a relevant piece if you have to send this to them to add to it on your own? Wendy says yes. Anybody else? Definitely, Janice says. Anything yes for Henry? Shelley, are you there? May have gone to continue dealing with her offer she's dealing with. So
I'm going to ask a question here.
Okay, Shelley says yes. Henry, go ahead.
Okay. Are you sending that to them in writing? Or are you doing that as a verbal?
Well, that's a very good question. If we're in today's world on dotloop and they're quickly texting you back saying, I'm still at work, I really want to look at the offer, send it to me in dotloop and we'll talk at 4 o'clock. What do you do with that? Anybody? You haven't gotten a cover letter from the agent with it about the buyers. Nobody's going to chime in?
Well, that's why I proposed the question.
Okay. So remembering that when emotions are high, intelligence is low, and this person's at work, and what's the number one thing they're going to look at? Price. That's the number one thing. They're going to open the offer and go, are you crazy? And off they go. And you have no control over it. You don't know who's around them, if they're going to flame that fire or help to put it out. So putting something, I've called the agent to discuss for each offer. Great. I think that's a really good idea. And that if you do have to send it to them beforehand, before you're going to be able to meet with them, that you do need to put something with it to help them understand where the offer came from in terms of what the buyer's thoughts were, what's important to them. I had one come in not long ago that I had this exact thing happen with. Sellers were both at work and they were at very different locations. And the first offer was about $40,000 less than what we accepted at the end of this. And so no question, the first offer was going to raise emotions like crazy. And I got back a text from the husband saying, I won't even tell you what he said, it wasn't very nice, but that was fine. And I got a text back from the wife saying, you are kidding, right? And I went, okay. And so it was near and dear to me when I'm doing this today with you guys to go, okay, note to self, that should have had a cover letter that stated, and there were all things we talked about because I had talked to the buyer's agent about who her clients were. I'd had discussions with I told my clients everything the agent told me in terms of where they were coming from, what they were doing, what they'd owned before, all of the pieces, what their concerns were with the house, what they liked about the house. But at that moment, I thought, oh no, I'm never bringing them back. And it actually was one case, and I rarely have I ever done this, to say to my sellers when they're saying, as the husband was very clear in his language of what to tell them to do, which wasn't the way I went back, but said, so if that's clearly how you are feeling about this offer, then I suggest that we reject it. And we did. And they jumped immediately $30,000 with the next offer. And I went, okay. But now my clients, their back is up and their mood is down. And they're like, what are these people, crazy? And they're, now I'm on the phone with the two of them because now they're home. And I'm on my way to get to them to talk about it, but we're on the phone, all three of us. And they're saying, you know what, we don't even want to deal with these people. These people are da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, whoa, okay. These people are buyers. They're pre-approved. They like your house. They reacted in their first offer because they've been told it's a buyer's market. So they're feeling things out. Let's deal with what we have in front of us. Let's go through all of the aspects of this offer. This house closes this week. It's one that the offer actually came together fairly easily after that. But that first piece was that learning for me going, you knew that. You knew this offer was going to be explosive when they opened it. And even though you had conversation about these buyers, that didn't matter at that point. Would a cover letter have mattered? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But I just think as we use technology more and more and more, we sometimes with some people get to less face time with them, where we're able to help to cool the emotions down and kind of level things out. So just bringing that up to say, if you guys find any great solutions for that, let me know, because I find it's happening a lot where, it's kind of you think you know people, but then they text you something and you go, okay, following your instructions. However, I think that we should talk about this. So on that piece of reacting to an offer that may not be exactly what they want, because let's be honest, basically they react the same way we react when an agent calls and says, well, I have an offer for you. And you go, yes. And then you see it and you go, oh, really? Wow, are we ever going to bring this together? Let's get to work, because that really is our part of get to work. Janice, if you're not able to meet, have you ever video chatted with buyers and sellers? Yes, definitely FaceTime with people, and it's a good secondary thing. Not always can you do that, particularly if they're at work, because they really need to kind of come out of they're sometimes dealing with it from a place that they're just ducking into for a few minutes. But yeah, I think it's a great alternative to just having conversation with them or text with them, because in the world of text, there's so much room for interpretation. I've always worried that if I'm trying to establish the rationale coming from the buyer's side, that they're going to look at me and go, who are you working for anyway? Because you're just trying to make sure that they're seeing all aspects of the offer. And there are so many important aspects of the offer, not just price. To some people, that's all they'll ever care about, but for the most part, they need to bring all of the other pieces in. I thought it was really well stated in here when it talks about, let me just find the spot. Basically, it talks about kind of diffusing a seller to say, I know and understand we're not at the price yet. However, let's look at all of the other aspects of the offer and how those are going to affect you. If you could move in 30 days, as they're suggesting in this offer, would that fulfill your goal to need to be where you need to be? Oh yeah, okay, that's a different thing. I need to look at that closing date. Well, yeah, that closing date actually works perfectly for me. Okay, so if you, and then going into the positive things or the things that have potential to be positive and being able to bring that to them. So looking at all of the pieces, I think I missed something that, did you see Henry had said?
Scroll up.
Okay. Sorry, Henry, I missed your comment.
I was just
Read tone, yes, thank
saying
you.
though, making a comment, you can't read tone in a text. And that's the problem with people get too used to texting now, and that's where you get into misinterpretation, which usually goes into a very wrong way.
Yeah, I think we probably have all had texts that, you know, if you think about the rules of communication and the roles that come in that only 7% of the total message is related to the actual words that are said in communication. The other 93% comes from tone and delivery. So all the things people see and hear as you're delivering the information. So if you're taking 93% of that away and it's strictly in them reading the agreement, having some text conversation or an email, then your opportunity to help them understand the benefits, the good things there, and how we're going to work on the other things is really challenging. So thank you for that, Henry. It's a great point. Just want to refer back to their checklist. Their checklist for the sellers is really the exact same as what we went through for the buyers, because there's all the same things in the agreement of purchase and sale that we're going to talk about. But presenting the offer, it really does go back to that if you can't read tone in a text or in an email, you basically also can't really know the emotional state on either side. So if emotions are high and you need to diffuse that, it's really hard to know that. However, with the lowball offer, you can pretty much assume you're going to go there. So it is about then being able to put in, here's the highlights of the offer. It's got the closing that you're looking for. So we're there with that piece. It's got this in terms of they haven't asked for any of your appliances and you really want to take those. So the one thing we really need to work on is price. Would you agree? And presenting the positives in the way that's going to help them to also diffuse the emotion. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you for being the nod in the room, Taylor. Reaching the decision. So as we go through all of the terms and we look at all of the pieces that are there, and at the end of the day, the seller, we go, okay, we have three choices. We can accept the offer as it's presented, as it is here. We can counter the offer, which is we allow to keep the pieces that are okay for you and work for you, and we go back and work on the things that don't work for you, or we can reject the offer. I just used, for an example, one that I honestly felt that there was no way we were going to get the message back to these folks unless we did reject it. And very rare that I've ever agreed with sellers when they say, oh, just reject it. I don't even want to talk about it. Because most of the time, once they start to calm down and work through it, we've been able to bring something together. Depends on the parties, of course, and how far apart they are. I had a client tell me this one time a long, long time ago of, I know as agents there's lots of times we're doing that negotiation and we get down to that last little bit of money and we're going, in your head you're going, really? We're talking about $1,500 here. And you think, we're talking about a $400,000 house, $1,500. I had a client say it to me in a way that I went, okay, I'm never going to forget that. And he said, Wendy, it's that last $3,000 that's actually my money. The rest is the bank's. And I went, oh, okay. That puts it in a little different perspective for me. And I always remember that when we're negotiating to go, right, this is your money. So it's important because in some cases it means them being able to buy a new appliance. It means them having money to move. It can mean all kinds of things to them. That doesn't mean anything to the other party though. So it's about when we get down to that piece and being able to bring it into perspective and being able to go, okay, I always say to sellers, you know what? The first offer is what works best for the buyer. We'll counter with what works best for you, and then we really get to work to see if we can come to an agreement that works for everybody, that's acceptable to everybody. And are you okay with that? And they go, well, okay, yeah, then it's not just about the buyer and what they want, everything for nothing, because as sellers, everybody feels that. Well, they want it all and they don't want to pay. And as a buyer, then it's got to be the same way. So I try to be able to say that to other agents as well of, you know, I've explained to my seller that your offer represented what's best for the buyer, what their wishes are. Now I have a counter to come back to you that expresses what the seller's best case scenario wishes are. And, you know, let's take it to them and see where they are. So in doing that, in being able to come up to the middle, your next module will be all about negotiation and all of the strategies of negotiating. This session is really about the mechanics of all of the pieces that we have to kind of bring into it. So I have taught the negotiation session and attended the negotiation session, one of my favorite sessions, because it really is about a win-win. And it's one of the things that Keller Williams, I think, teaches quite differently than some of the brokerages out there of it's got to be a win for everybody or it'll never come together and be a great closing. So how do you actually do a win-win if you start off with something that's really far from what their expectation is? So reaching a decision, helping them make the decision, remembering it's always their decision. Your job is to be the information broker, to bring all of that information to them to say, so let's update the CMA as they actually looked at. So these houses that have sold since we've been on the market have actually pulled their prices down. We knew that. So they're looking at those end results and saying, we don't see your house as being worth more than what the average in this neighborhood has come down to. Would you agree that that's something that they have a point there? And some sellers are going to go, no, of course not, because my house has da, 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 da. And how do you take them through that process? How do you help them to understand that we still need to work with these folks and see if we can come to a successful conclusion? So, go ahead. Somebody was starting. I heard somebody. Chime in anytime, guys. Presenting offers, that is a role play situation, and it is something that if you feel the least bit uncomfortable presenting an offer, it's going to be much more challenging to get the sellers to listen to just the information. So in that, taking some time to role play and taking some time to play with the scripts is super important because you don't want to be searching for words live with your sellers. That's something that's really challenging, and it's hard to bring their emotions down if you are actually fighting for the words to say and not really owning it. So be careful with that part of it and making sure you're comfortable with the language that you're going to present this in. So the scripts are there, and I'm going to tell you guys to take some time working with the scripts. responding to the offer, the same thing. And then we've got your turn to work on a purchase and sale, which we're not going to do because you're online and it's a little bit more challenging to be able to bring that. I actually thought we'd have more people in front of us. So, if they're going to accept the offer, how do you need to deal with the sellers, and what is it that you need to make sure that you're going through with them if they say, you know what, yep, we're good with this, we're going to accept everything on there? How do you make sure they know and understand all the pieces on there? Going through it piece by piece, clause by clause, what those things mean, and having them actually check it off with you. So whether you are live with them, whether you are on a phone call with them, or you're on a FaceTime with them, however you're doing it, making sure that you are documenting, that they are answering you, that they understand all the clauses, particularly if they've lived in a house for 40 years, never sold a house before, and are going, oh my gosh, does this mean we sold our house? Oh my God, this means we sold our house. The emotions are high again. Making sure that they actually know and understand those clauses, the things that are second nature to us because we deal with them every day, making sure that they understand them is really, really critically key for the sellers. If we're doing a counter, so counters are always interesting, and interesting in that they highlight the things that stood out to the seller as unacceptable. So in putting back to them a counter, let's use an example that the house is on the market for $200,000. The offer that came in is $150,000. So in doing that, the first thing that's happening with the seller, anybody ever had that they look at it and go, are they crazy? And they want to do the rejection, and then you calm them down and say, at least if we counter, we'll know if they're going to play or they're not going to play. We'll get a better feel for what it is that at the end of the day is going to be acceptable for them, and will it go anywhere or will it not? We'll at least know. So if we're going to counter and the seller says, well, I told you already I'm not taking a penny less than $195, and you're going to write a counter and say, here's our counter offer, here's the price. I'm going to go through all of the other elements with them of all of the things that are important in it. And at the end of the day, the only thing they're worried about is the price. Everything else is good. In sending that counter back to the other agent, what's going to be the conversation, the cover letter, the information that you're going to send back? Are you going to say, my sellers have told me to tell you not a penny less than $195 are they going to take? Anybody ever had that experience with the seller saying that to you, to say, you tell them I'm not taking 1 penny less than this, and they can go pound sand if they're not going to sign this? Anybody ever had that? And what do you do with that information? Henry, go ahead.
Well, I was waiting for Shelley on this one because this did happen to me last summer.
Yeah.
There was property. It went on the market. It was on for 4 days. We had 4 offers coming in. I was representing the sellers, not the sellers, the buyers.
Okay.
One of the buyers. They had recently moved to Nova Scotia, and anyway, I told them, I said, 3 offers are coming in, and they're all going to be close to list. They came in $30,000 away from list, and they weren't going to raise it, and they got angry with me because their offer wasn't accepted because the house wasn't worth as much as what these people were willing to buy it for. And this was my very first deal.
Fun.
Trial by fire.
Oh, okay. So how did you deal with that?
Why they weren't getting it.
Okay. So how did you deal with that, and what happened with those buyers and you?
Well, it was to the point. They had a price. The way that I presented it was, you have to buy this. You have to do this with a price that you are comfortable with. if you feel this is the number that this is the only number you find acceptable, this is the one that I will present. But please do understand, we have 3 other people that are putting in an offer, and they are all closer to the actual list price. Is this the number that you want me to present?
Okay.
And so I presented
Mm-hmm.
and got rejected.
Shocking.
But it was that whole, but they were shocked that why would somebody want to spend this much, and this is all it's worth, and our number is the real number.
Okay. So what
Yeah.
happened from that point forward, Henry?
They, of course, their offer was rejected,
Yeah.
and they were just highly annoyed and everything else, and just couldn't understand. I did my part, but it was just, if you were dealing with what was your worst case scenario, I started off with my worst case scenario.
Okay.
And it was that whole thing of, well, maybe there'll be something down the line we can work with later. Maybe it might fall through on the inspection.
Yeah.
You may have an opportunity there. Try to keep it as open-ended as possible, but we were not dealing with an ideal situation.
Okay.
It was one of those situations, how can you make them happy when you know nothing you're going to do is going to be what they want it to be?
Right. Okay. So were you able to continue to work with them as buyers and find them something else and get a deal put together with them?
It was a case where they already owned one property and they were just looking for another summer residence.
Okay.
And that was, mind you, the summer residence was the equivalent of most other people's houses.
Yeah.
But the part was, they wanted that specific item at that specific price, and they didn't want anything but that specific item at that price, and nothing else was acceptable.
Okay. So we go back to what really determines the market is what a buyer is willing to pay and a seller is willing to accept. And that's a case where there were other buyers willing to pay something very different. So of course, the seller is going to accept something very different on that case. So in that type of scenario, where you're saying that to them it was just another property, a summer home, that reflects on what it was worth to them, right? So
Correct.
yeah, so therefore finding them something else, kind of like a needle in a haystack, right? It's kind of one of those pieces where you have to make that decision of time invested, and is that going to be a one-time thing, or are they going to be salvageable as a buyer to do something else, to find something else for? And you're saying basically, nope, that was just one of those things. They were on a bit of a whim, which sometimes goes with why they won't go to what it's worth to somebody else, because it's not worth it to them. Am I summarizing?
Correct.
Okay? Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, correct.
So it does really go back to understanding value is what a buyer's willing to pay and a seller's willing to accept. And if that buyer's not willing to pay it, will somebody else? Who knows? That's a risk that the seller takes, and it is their decision at the end of the day. Okay. Thanks for sharing that one with us, Henry. Those, I think, we've probably all had some of those. Multiple offers are always interesting in getting buyers to really understand this is your one shot. There are other people here, and anybody's going to pay what they feel it's worth, and that may be very different than what you feel it's worth. So you have to be comfortable at the end of the day with what you write on the page, because you won't get another chance generally. Does that make sense? Because there's always going to be, in the case of multiple offers, some of them with the big L on their forehead going losers. So how does that feel? It never feels good to be a loser. And at that moment, who usually gets the blame? A lot of times it might be us going, well, you didn't tell me, but I didn't understand. But how come I don't get to do another offer? And sometimes that's where going through the information, having it checked off as you cover it, having it in your file to say, well, remember when we talked about this and you checked it off that we talked about it? Oh, okay, yeah, I do. Covering all of those bases so people understand. Sometimes buyers have to lose a property before they get really serious, and particularly when we've been in what we term as a buyer's market. That's something that people hear it on media. They hear that term very loosely thrown around. How many of you would describe our current market as a buyer's market? I just want to hear everybody chime into this as to whether you would consider it a buyer's market or you would not consider it currently a buyer's market. Anybody? Can you guys chime in on that one? No opinions?
Hi, Wendy.
Oh, okay.
I personally feel that it is a buyer's market, but it definitely depends on the area. And I'm very reluctant, careful to say that to anyone because you're affecting your listings and such. And I'm just saying it's a matter of opinion at this point is what I tell people,
Okay.
Depending on the area. When you're talking Vancouver or Toronto or whatever, it's certainly not a buyer's market there. So I just use that as an example. Depends on the area. If you're talking South End or Eastern Passage, whatever. So, and then I'll give more specifics about what just sold in the particular area that the seller or buyer is questioning, just so that you're not giving negative or misinformation, first of all, but also trying to eliminate the negativity of any real estate activity at this time. So, in a nutshell, I'm reluctant to say whether it's buyers or sellers.
Okay. So you just soften that and talk more specifics.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Wendy. Henry, were you going to?
Well, I agree completely with Wendy, and I'd be curious to hear Janice and Shelley's comment on this. For the area that I'm at down on the Aspatagan, there was a house that went up in the past 6 months, and I know the seller who put it up, and because of the properties along the Highway 329 here, went up. They were expecting it for it to be up for a year and a half, perfectly fine with that. We can live with our life like that. Sold in 3 months.
Okay.
Panic, we gotta move. But and meanwhile, all the other properties are still sitting on the market. But as I was pointing out to them, and I point out to others, is okay, let's look at it at a marketing perspective. What were the key ingredients that made this sale come in on time and at the acceptable price? Because that's what market is what it's looking for.
Okay. So it was, can you expand on that just for a second? So it was more desirable than some of its competition, priced more fairly than some of its competition, or just just had something that appealed more?
I think it's the fact that it was more the location of it and also what was contributing to it, the actual property itself.
Okay.
I think too many times it's trying to get over the fact you don't always have a Taj Mahal. And
True story.
And explaining that to the sellers that the buyers in a particular area, and it's the same in a city as well, these are the key ingredients that they're looking for. But sometimes when you're in a market that's taking some time, it's always great to see those ones that are the ones that are going quickly, because that's really, could that actually be determining what the actual price and what the desirability actually is.
Okay.
Because we only have so much of that product available. Meanwhile, we have all this other stuff still sitting on the shelf.
Okay. So a good sale that is a good ratio of sale price to listing price and a really good time frame is positive for everybody.
Well, because everybody's wondering why is my place isn't selling, and I'm kind of dealing with that with a couple of sellers right now. Why does nobody want my place? but we don't have that much to gauge from because when you see what actually sells out here.
Right. Yeah. Which is kind of the same everywhere. It's probably the same thing in commercial, Taylor, as well, that you have certain things that catch people's eye or attention or is desirable to them in some way that's sometimes hard to put words to play with it. It's sometimes very difficult to go, well, that was it. Unless you hear it directly from the buyers, here's what this property had that I didn't see in the other ones. Have you ever gone to the buyer's agent and said, you know what, I'm really having a hard time for my seller to understand why your people chose this property versus theirs. Can you give me anything to be helpful as to why they made that decision? Anybody ever done that, where you're just going and looking for some help? I think that within Keller Williams, I think we're pretty good at doing that and having conversation, because everybody sees these properties a little bit different depending on what is important to them. But sometimes it's really mind-boggling. I've seen properties go that I'm like, are you kidding me? They paid that for that house, and I've been in it, and I think, wow, okay, what was it about that property that convinced that buyer to pay that much money for it? And sometimes it's something I never would have guessed, ever, 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 because they weren't my buyers and I didn't know what was important to them. So has anybody ever done that? Or can you see that being maybe a bit of a useful tool? Sorry, I'm joking here.
No, it makes sense.
Okay. I've done it, and I've done it where the buyer's agent was really helpful. I had one not long ago that I was doing an open house at this property, and the seller had been on his own as a FSBO before and had been really bitter about the house 2 doors down getting a sale, and that he didn't get the sale. And it was really interesting because there was nobody at my open house at that moment, and I was outside, and I was just taking a few extra pictures outside, and this guy walked up to me and said, oh, you're the listing agent for this house? And I said, yeah. And he said, good luck. And I went, excuse me? And he said, yeah, I live right down there. And I knew the house because I had seen it in the comparables. And I went, oh, really? Interesting. You just bought that house. So what led you to buy that house versus this house? And he looked at me and said, the a-hole that's the seller. And I went, oh, wasn't expecting that one. And I just sort of was like, oh, okay, so was there anything about the house that you bought that's quite different from this one? And you did have a couple of things, but it gave me incredible information that I left going, how do I tell the seller this one? And go, okay, it was just in emotions. It was totally based on emotions, that it was a seller who should never have been exposed to a buyer because he was very emotionally attached and really felt his product was far superior to everything else, but he couldn't put it in any justifiable way. It wasn't because he spent more money. It wasn't because he added more things to it. He just felt emotion that it was better. And it was such a good learning experience because thinking, I really wish I had this conversation with this guy about 3 weeks ago. But it was really an interesting learning experience that I went, okay, you just don't know what is driving a buyer to buy that house versus this house. And it can be things that we can guess all day at and not necessarily know. So I think it's a good idea to be able to do that and have in a lot of cases, they may have shown yours. Yours may have come second and you go, so what was it that, why did it come second? I just love to be able to help the seller with this. And a lot of times agents will be once they're out of the deal that, they've already gone and bought and everything's good. Sometimes then they really will tell you a little bit more that you can share and use, which I think is great. So thanks for sharing that one, Henry. That was great. Really good piece there on that. Buyer's market, what is it technically? Does anybody know what technically you define as a buyer's market? Is there a definition to use that term, buyer's market? Because I think quite frankly, I think it's been thrown around a lot. Go ahead, Taylor. Just a second, I want to give you the...
I feel like it's a pretty vague term.
Yeah.
In general, it does, yeah. What defines it, I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't been around long enough, but just.
Okay. So, but to you, you hear a vagueness when you hear the term?
Yeah, a little bit, I guess. I don't, yeah, at this point for me, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Would a vagueness be something that it is used to benefit a buyer?
Wendy, I think a buyer's market is when there is a very high inventory to choose from, and the absorption rate is, it takes a longer time to sell.
Ah, thank you. Thank you, Shelley.
No,
It's,
thank you.
yeah, it is about the rate of what's coming on in an area and a rate of what's going off as a sale in an area. So the absorption rate. And if you're looking at it and going, you know what? Wow, in the last 3 months, there's been 4 properties in this price range in this area that have sold. And right now we have 40 active properties in this price range in this area. What is that telling you about price range and area? You've sold 4 in the last 3 months. How many months of inventory do you have? Like 30 months, right? So that is maybe an area that might be termed that. What happens to the psyche of buyers as soon as they use that term, buyer's market? Do they feel like they need to get a deal? Yeah, or that they're going to miss out on a deal? I've had so many of them that I think, come on, this is the perfect property for you. And then I realize they're afraid they're going to miss a good deal because they keep hearing people talk about a buyer's market, a buyer's market. That means you're going to get it so cheap. And it doesn't necessarily mean that. It just sometimes means it's going to take longer to absorb some of that product. Some of that product might come back off the market, be expired or be pulled off the market. Some of it will get sold. Some of it will get reduced. But it's, I think what you said, Shelley, is perfect in terms of the absorption rate. So when it's used and it's a term like that, I've had several offers over the last year and a half come in with an agent saying, well, come on, it's a buyer's market. This isn't a bad offer. And I kind of go, hey, at least I know what I'm dealing with in terms of the buyer's information, what they're getting and how they're getting it, and so what their thought process is of where it should go.
I think I'm wondering too how it affects sellers and their mental approach to it, selling and doing price adjustments, and knowing that if they're in a buyer's market, you know, do they want to reduce their price as much as they would at another time because they know that whatever the price is set at, that the buyer is going to come in and put it down even further. So I think sometimes for the seller, it can be a bit of a mental game as well, like mentally dumping through some of those hoops.
Yeah, great point, Janice, that they want to price higher to give them room to be lowballed. Is that basically kind of what you're saying? Part of it?
Yes, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, they feel like they need to add in some negotiating room into the price that they're yeah.
Yeah. One of the terms that I try to make sure that I get through, if I can at all, to a seller is it's much easier to negotiate hard on an offer than have no offer to negotiate. So when they want to leave a lot of flex room in their pricing, that if they leave all that flex room in their pricing and they've got lots of room to negotiate, there's nothing saying to the people as they're going through listings and going, oh, but it doesn't have as much size, it's not as new, it doesn't have this or it doesn't have this, and it's priced like it does, I don't even want to bother to go see it. So it is much easier to negotiate hard on an offer that you've got, that people are engaged enough in your property that they've written this down and stated, I want this property. I'm putting it on paper. So it's much easier to negotiate hard on it than have nothing and going, what's wrong? You aren't advertising it enough.
Yeah, agreed.
Kind of what we hear. Okay. Okay, more than kind of what we hear. So in closing, and I apologize because I'm realizing we're past our noon time, would like to hear from you guys as to what we talked about that you would see helping to grow your business when it comes to dealing with buyers with an offer, dealing with sellers with an offer, and what your takeaway is from today. You're going to, of course, have some homework to do, and that is where you're online. You've got completing your mission for the next program, which is negotiating win-win. And I'm hoping that we've set up enough on the offer part that you can really jump into the win-win part of it as you go on to the next program. But if you would, let me know what you think from all the stuff we did and talked about today, and not having the benefit to role play it. What's your takeaway from today? And I'd like to go, if I can, everybody individually. Wendy, you're chiming in there first. Do you want to?
I absolutely loved your expression, when emotions are high, intelligence is low, and I know that that is something to be discussed in a tactful manner to remind that calmness prevails, or cool heads prevail, whatever.
Yeah.
I really appreciated the refresher of and hearing how everybody is doing out there with how they react to different situations. So, but I think that was the greatest takeaway for me.
Okay.
Just to be able to explain that, we all know that calmness is the key, but to be able to articulate that and in a positive way to our buyers and sellers is the key. Yeah. And yeah, I like what you said, and it's best to do that prior to emotions going high, so that and nobody wants to be told that their intellect is low because they're so emotional.
No.
So,
and when it's put in a way that it's human nature, we all do it. It's kind of depersonalizes it in that moment. And if you've talked about that before, they can kind of laugh at themselves a little bit. Like I actually have, that has been something that far prior to coming into real estate, that in training in my corporate world when I worked there, I was always was taught that. And it's come back at me when my daughter, who is 28 years old, has said to me, ooh, a little high on the emotional side right now, aren't we? And I'm like, yes, how did I not see that? And yes, she got me. And then it would all of a sudden become funny, and you just kind of would let your emotions settle. So it does give you a way to talk about it, that we're all human. And it happens to every single one of us, because it does. It happens to every single one of us if we're honest about it. So thanks, Wendy. Thank you for sharing that. Who wants to go next? Taylor? Okay, let me get you the mic here.
Big takeaway from me, and it's been discussed in previous classes too, is kind of helping to deal with that, is telling your client, well, put yourself, if you're dealing with a buyer, put yourself in the seller's shoes. And look at it from that point of view. And I think it's a completely different point of view, and it helps people understand, okay, now I understand why they think it's such a lowball offer, or why they're not happy with this. And I know Richard and Brenda kind of stressed that, and you use it as an example a couple times today. Okay. And I like that personally. I think it's a good way to have people kind of take a step back and reflect and be like, okay, it does make sense coming from that side.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, Taylor. Okay, cool. So making sure that people understand there's more than one perspective. There's more than theirs at stake. Excellent. Okay. Shelley's gone. Janice, Henry, takeaways?
I think
it's
for
a
me,
whole...
Oh,
okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Henry.
Oh, girl, you go.
Go, Janice.
Okay, I was just going to say that I think for me, understanding when you're presenting an offer to the seller, or vice versa. It's always trying to understand the other side before you present the offer as much as you can, so that you can ask good questions and you can help present the offer easier to the clients, whether they're buyers or sellers, so that you're able to help reduce some of that emotion.
Okay.
Because you're going to get a lot of that when it's somebody's home that maybe they've lived in or grown up in or raised their kids in, or
Yeah.
But try to understand as much as you can from the other side about why they've put in the offer that they have.
Okay. Excellent. So the big, some of the big,
communicate, like that's it goes back to that communication and making sure that everybody is aware of what's happening and what's important to the buyer or to the seller. And whether the side agrees with that or not, at least they have a bit of a better understanding. So sometimes it helps to diffuse some of those emotions.
Okay. So perspective.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Janice. Excellent. Thanks. Henry, for you?
I would agree with Janice on what it is that she said.
Yeah.
And also the fact of emotions high, intelligence low. That is a key phrase that I will be instilling in the beginning of the conversations with new people.
Yeah.
Or with new prospects.
Okay. And it goes along with perspective and process, right? It kind of all
Yes.
ties in together. Okay. Excellent. Anything else for anybody? No? Okay. Well, thank you guys for being here online, for being here in person, for participating. Mission number 10, you do have homework to do, and the homework to do is some of the same that you've been doing, your 10-4s and your calls and visiting properties, getting the experience in all of those things, practicing your scripts, and preparing for the negotiation, which is a really fun program. It's a really great program, and I think it really will ride on the backs of this for you as you go into that. So watching the video on negotiating and being ready for that piece. So I will send you guys the the clauses that I kept before they took that off. And let me know if there's anything else that I can do to help in any way. Thank you for all the great info, because teaching is about learning, and I learned a ton today from you guys, so I always really, really appreciate that. And thanks for sharing and being there and spending the time. So good luck on your next program on negotiating, and I'll see you guys at the end of the Ignite program. And I got to say, it's something that even though things are busier out there now and it's spring, putting your time into doing this program will pay you back in spades. It absolutely will. It's all about getting better and better and better at what we do, and that's all about spending the time and practicing and getting the lingo down. And I loved what you said at the beginning, Janice, of just feeling like you're not a hardcore salesperson and feeling really comfortable in your own shoes to present yourself as a professional realtor. So absolutely fabulous on you to be able to take that away. So thanks, guys. Have a great day, and we will see you. I won't see you on the next program, but I'll see you at the end of Ignite for graduation.
What is it?
Negotiating win-wins. Yeah, it's a great program.